T-minus 20 seconds. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
And we're live on YouTube, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to a special episode of the Flash Podcast, your podcast for all things related to CW's The Flash, starring Grant Gustin as Barry Allen, aka The Flash. I'm your host, Andy B, as always. And first of all, welcome back. We're in 2021. We survived the crazy that was 2020-ish, I guess. We're still alive, mostly. And so far, 2021 is definitely on a high road already. So this will be an interesting year. But I'm excited to be back. It's been a couple weeks of break, and I'm not joined today by my regular crew, but I have a very special super friend with me. You know her. We worked together on so many things before on DC Podcast. She's one of the amazing hosts of Supergirl Rated, the best Supergirl podcast that is out there on the interwebs. And it's my honor to welcome back Miss Rebecca Johnson. Rebecca, welcome back. Happy hope you had a great holiday. And how's your 2021 so far?
Well, thanks for having me back. So far, so good. We would like to think Supergirl Radio is the best Supergirl podcast out there, but there's also lots of great Supergirl podcasts that you can listen to as well. So do check us out if you are interested in Supergirl. But thank you for letting me be here and join you for today's event.
Yes, because many of you may know that me and Rebecca, we're one of the things that we love so much together, that is a part of our friendship for so many years, is DCEU, and particularly Zack Snyder. And as you can see, we're dressed for the occasion, definitely. And if I don't have a green screen like Miss Johnson here, but if you look at her in her tab, she has Zack Snyder's Justice League, the teaser promo, photo, I guess. Well, at least that was the first official thing we got when they announced the Snyder Cut. And this year, 2021 is it's gonna be a good year for so many reasons, and one of them is because the Snyder Cut is finally coming to HBO Max in just a few months. I cannot believe that. My first thought when they went on New Year's Eve was that soon I can say that the Snyder Cut is coming because it's 2021, and I'm ecstatic, and I'm very excited today because we have a very, very special guest with us. And for people who are, who follow the Snyder Cut movement, who are big fans of Snyder, that there's an amazing book coming out very, very soon that follows the big journey of the Snyder Cut. And to say that it's been a long journey would be an understatement, because it is maybe the most fascinating journey in cinema history of all time. I cannot even think of a movie that has had this much focus and attention in at least the 2+ decades that I've been alive. So I'm excited for the guest that we have on today. I've been following him for quite a while, and I'm so excited the big role that he's playing in the whole Snyder Cut experience. So first of all, it's my honor to welcome the author of Release the Snyder Cut, and I want to make sure I get the title right, because I've been flubbing on this so much today. I was practicing during lunch, whatever, and I said, why can't I make this work? So Release the Snyder Cut, the crazy true story behind the fight that saved Zack Snyder's Justice League. So it's my honor to welcome the managing director of Cinema Blend and the author of this book, Mr. Sean O'Connell. Sean, welcome to the Flash Podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm wonderful. Andy, Rebecca, so good to be with both of you guys. Really appreciate the time. And this is a thrill. I'm ready to dive into all things DCEU, and especially all things Snyder Cut.
Yes, I'm excited too, and I know that this, the fact that that all this is happening finally, because for years, there was the myth of it doesn't exist, there's no cut, the movement is pointless. But then look where we are now, almost 3.5 years later, and we're sitting here, just roughly 2 months away from the release on the HBO Max. So, and we have we have a lot to discuss about it. But Sean, before we get into discussing the large DCEU and the Snyder, so I want because some of our viewers may not be familiar with you, your body of work, and so on. So how did you discover your love for journalism and writing, and kind of where you are today?
Sure. I mean, that traces all the way back to the 1990s is how long I've been doing this. And really, I was a film buff growing up. I was super into comics. I grew up reading primarily Marvel, but a lot of DC off and on. And as the industry sort of shifted into what I like to call right now is the golden age of comic book adaptations and superhero movies, I was in a really lucky spot because I was writing for a bunch of other outlets, things like Fandango and filmcritic.com, and then I was freelancing for Cinema Blend. So I'm currently the managing editor at Cinema Blend. I've been there for close to 8 years now, but I've been in the online journalism field for over 20 years at this point, covering a little bit of everything. But really, the prevalent beat for the past 20 years has been comic book movies, superhero movies, in the way that the MCU and the DCEU both tried to build their universes. So, a really integral point of that becomes what happened to Zack and the fate of Justice League, and of course, where it goes from there. But prior to that, I was always just a movie buff, sort of fell into writing about, commenting about films, and as the superhero industry, the comic book film industry grew, I just grew along with it.
Yeah, I mean this genre has evolved on so many levels for the past, all these years. I remember just being 7 years old and when I was 7, we didn't have cinematic universes, not yet. So that is crazy. And I as a fellow journalist myself, I've been following Cinema Blend. One of my good friends works for you, Adam Holmes.
Oh, I love Adam.
Adam is one of my best friends. Adam, I think he's I think he's tuning in right now. He told me he was going to tune in. So if you're watching right now, Adam, hello.
Adam knows how much I love him. He's an amazing dude. We're very lucky to have him.
Yes, yes, I definitely. I do brag about him whenever I can, and because I remember I think I was one of the first people he told that he was going to start working for you guys. I'm like, they're so lucky to have you. But let's get into this big journey and how you have played a part. So, what was your first connection or maybe introduction to DC Extended Universe movies?
Well, it would be Man of Steel, I guess, because prior to that point, we had been tracking really religiously the construction of the Marvel Cinematic Universe and what they had started back with Iron Man in 2008. And so Warner Brothers at that time was still pretty immersed in Christopher Nolan's Batman trilogy, of which, we were covering up and down. But that wasn't necessarily going to expand anywhere. Because nobody was thinking cinematic universes at that time. At most, you got a trilogy out of successful characters. Even with Tim Burton's Batman films, he got a direct sequel. They kind of spun it off into the Schumacher films. I don't think anybody wants to remember Batman and Robin, so let's just call that a trilogy. But then, when Marvel started to put together this bigger picture, and they got to Iron Man and Thor and Captain America First Avenger, you could see the wheels turning at Warner Brothers and DC saying okay, well, why can't we start to build towards something like that? And Man of Steel would have been the first step in that direction, to the point where you could tell that Man of Steel laid some of the groundwork to where they wanted to build toward. Batman, Superman became very quickly, let's advance the idea of this cinematic universe, because you're bringing in one movie, immediately the next superhero, the Superman movie, he didn't get a direct, clean sequel. He got a movie that had to build in Batman, introduce Batman and Gotham, had to introduce Wonder Woman, had to tease, at the very least, the existence of Aquaman, the Flash, and Cyborg. So they were hurrying along, and we were tracking all of this. At Cinema Blend, it was a huge story driver for us of how DC was going to catch up and who was going to direct what and what the Snyders were going to do as executive producers. And that included Suicide Squad. And it included, at one point, Warner Brothers announcing a full slate of up to 10 films that were going to be a Cyborg film and a Flash film and a Green Lantern Corps and all these different places they wanted to go. And at the time, it was, even just from a journalistic perspective, it was like, slow down, guys, you're moving too fast. Let the movies breathe and succeed first before you determine which direction you're going. But we saw what happened with that.
Yeah, I mean, I remember 2014, especially as the Flash podcast, the night after the second episode of Flash had aired, they announced the entire slate of DC movies. Ezra Miller is going to be the Flash in the movies. It came out of nowhere for sure. So, this might be a little controversial, but but what was your initial reaction to the Justice League? Because that's we all talked about it, but I kind of just want to pick your brain on the first time you saw it, feeling like, what am I watching? Or what if you know what I mean.
Well, more than anything, it made me sad. It made me sad for the fans who had been waiting their entire lives to see a Justice League movie, like a live action Justice League movie. And again, a little bit of this is me being a Marvel fan and enjoying what they were doing. And by the time, the 2017 Justice League rolled around, we had, on the Marvel side, been able to enjoy 2 Avengers films to see that it's successful to bring those worlds together. They had introduced by that point the Guardians of the Galaxy, so you could see that you can introduce really weird characters that still kind of work if you give them the right filmmaker. So here we get to a full-on live-action Justice League where fans who have been, raised on these characters and dying to see them together for the very first time in their lives, and that's what you get. And so I couldn't believe that Warner Brothers let it come out because it was so bad. So it wasn't even just on the surface level, holy cow, this is really awful. It was, how many bad decisions had to occur during production that people who should know better didn't stop long enough to say, we can't do this. We can't, it showed such disdain for the fan base and really just flipped the finger at them of saying hey, you're going to show up no matter what. And it backfired. It blew up in their face. But for so many reasons, that movie is so bad, in the way that it negates everything that Zack had done in the 2 previous movies, in the way that it's just nobody involved in that movie. And I guess it goes back to Joss Whedon, understands the Justice League, understands the individual members of the DC universe. And, it forces them, the characters in the movie, to act out of character. Batman doesn't behave like that. Wonder Woman doesn't behave like that. It just sacrificed completely everything that makes DC different in an effort to try to become more mainstream and more family friendly. And truthfully, I was shocked and sad at watching what they allowed to happen to what should be their benchmark crown jewel of a franchise.
I know hindsight is 2020 and all of that, so this is probably nothing that anybody can say for certain. But because they chose not to go with Zack Snyder's story, his 5-film arc, I've always wondered, and I was going to ask what your thoughts were on this, if they stayed the path, if they had stayed with that 5-film arc and continued and followed through with what Zack was doing, do you think it would have been successful?
Well, I'm not sure. That's really hard to discuss because we just don't know how things were going to play out. But I write about this in the book, and this is what I was able to sort of determine from reporting, is that the executives at that time made what they thought was the right decision to shift gears and go in a different direction. The Batman versus Superman didn't cross $1 billion at the theatrical box office. And I know that sounds, obscene, that a movie has to cross $1 billion to be considered a success. But honestly, by that point, that's kind of where the comic book genre was. The Warner Brothers executives were looking over at Disney and at Marvel, and they were saying, Iron Man 3, the third Iron Man movie, which doesn't have a significant villain in it, is crossing $1 billion. And we can't get a DC movie that has Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman together to cross $1 billion. And so they translated that to essentially say the audience doesn't buy into Zack's vision of this universe, which, you know, by definition is more mature and more serious and takes things on a more epic storytelling level. That's just the way that Zack tells these stories. And I believe that Warner Brothers at the time was saying, we got to pull back. We have to go more audience friendly. Let's hire the guy who did 2 Avengers movies for Marvel and plug him in here and see if he can deliver more of the same. And it backfired. It blew up in their face. And I don't think that they realized how much it was going to backfire. And I guarantee they didn't think that 3.5 years from that decision that they'd still be dealing with the repercussions of that decision. But they definitely wanted to change tone. They really wanted to, you know, change horses midstream. And we know that that's a disaster. But there is some reality to the fact that the mainstream audiences were not showing up for Zack's movies. Like, there's definitely people who adore his interpretations of Batman, Superman. And you can make an argument too that the better version of BVS was the Ultimate Edition, and that one didn't even get theatrical distribution. So had they gone with that one, would that movie have done better? It's very possible. You know, that could be the case. But instead, you know, they released a chopped up version of Zack's vision. And then they did a chopped up version of Suicide Squad, which isn't the way that David Ayer wanted to go. So it's almost like they stopped believing in the filmmakers that they hired. So not only did they torpedo what Zack was trying to put together, they were torpedoing the early steps of this entire universe in an effort to go in a lighter, more family-friendly, audience-friendly direction. And so now what you're ending up with is the Solo Aquaman, the Shazam. Like, these are the kinds of movies that you're going to get in tone. And it's just drastically different than I think what Zack would have accomplished in his 5-film mark.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I've called Zack Snyder like the Riddler of directors because of like his Vero, what he's posting and so on. Because like sometimes like you don't know what he's trying to say, but like you can tell that this dude had such intriguing ideas that I think would be refreshing for not just the DC brand but also the superhero genre as a whole. So I think about David Ayer, like I just rewatched the first Suicide Squad trailer, like the one they released at Comic-Con with that, like the kind of creepy song, even though I kind of like it. And I'm like, this is not the movie that I saw in 2016. So definitely, I agree with you. Warner Brothers, what a studio.
Well, I asked the question because I always wondered, like, if we had gotten Martian Manhunter, if we had gotten Darkseid, if we had gotten the Atom, would that have made a difference? If we had gotten the black suit, you know, things like that were stripped away from what we got in the theaters, would that have made a difference? And sometimes I would argue, yeah, I think it would make a difference if we had seen Darkseid show up, if we had seen a continuation of the Nightmare sequence. So I don't know. It's one of those questions where it could have gone either way, but I think that there's an argument for both sides.
I really do wish that the studio had just maintained their confidence in the storyteller that they hired from the get-go. And I'm not saying that if there's a popular phrase called "you ride the hot hand," essentially, which is like if someone's doing really well for you, you just keep moving with them. But the flip side of that is not to give up on somebody just because their 2 movies didn't quite hit this ridiculous barometer of success that you're supposed to hit. And I think, but listen, there's a number of other instances. Like Zack had a family tragedy, you know, like he had to step away from the project. And so they did need to get a replacement. And I think that I believe that they capitalized on the fact that he had to step away to use that as their chance to strike and their chance to switch directions. Had that not happened, might we be in a completely different situation? Like, obviously we would be. I also think, and, you know, I'll probably get a lot of flack for saying this, but like, I believe that Joss could have made a watchable Justice League movie had he been given the time, but they did not want to move off of that November 17th, 2017 release date. They could have easily pushed back until the following summer and ironed out all of these differences, but they wanted to hold to that hard and fast. And there's business reasons why that was the case. And there was a merger taking place, and there were bonuses going to key executives that drove the decisions for them to do that. And most of those decisions were not being made for creative reasons; they were being made for financial reasons, and that's why it blew up. That's why it blew up in everybody's face.
Yeah, I recall days of having just have to write those kind of articles and just like, what is going on over there? It is quite something. I kind of wanted to just kind of go into the release Snyder Cut movement, and what was your first impression when discovering what it was and kind of where it was at and what they were fighting for?
Sure. So I was very familiar with them, having just seen the hashtag all over social media. I spend too much time on social media. I'm trying to wean myself off of it, just for mental health purposes. But you couldn't avoid the hashtag release the Snyder Cut. And initially you're like, oh, that's pretty funny. Like, look at this fan base. They believe that that another cut exists. And in the back of my mind, I thought like, well, I guess it's possible. Like I was always of the mindset. I was never one of the people who stood up and said like, there's no way possible that it could exist. Because if you understood, well, first off, in 2016, I was invited to the set of Justice League when it was still Zack's movie, and Zack and Debbie took us around and showed us all the storyboards and talked about the direction that they wanted to go in. So I knew that he had all of this stuff. I knew that he was prepared to put all this stuff together into it. And I also was fascinated, like you talk about him on Vero. I was really blown away by the amount of stuff that he continued to show on social media to basically say to his fans, like, no, you guys are right. Like there's a lot more that I have that's not in the version that you saw. And Zack swears up and down that he's never seen the theatrical cut. So he doesn't necessarily know what made it into it, but people will bring up stuff to him all the time. Like, hey, Zack, this Russian family, that had the bug spray, like, are they yours? And he'll be like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like he's amazed. And so, he kind of strung the fan base along. So I was fascinated by that aspect of it too, because anytime he would post something on Vero, we would jump on it on Cinema Blend. Like, oh, here's another image that Zack Snyder has shown from his quote unquote Snyder Cut. And so we were definitely covering it from the perspective of like, hey, this is a thing and some people want it. And the director even wants the people to want it. But it was the truly eye-opening moment for me traces back to, July of 2019. I got to make sure I'm getting the dates right. July of 2019, when I was in San Diego to cover Comic-Con, and the movement took the downtown San Diego area by storm. They had a plane that flew over with a banner. They had posters that wrapped all of the downtown bus stations with, hashtag release the Snyder Cut and quotes from the actors and from Zack himself, saying that he had a cut. And it was that moment when I was there to cover and I saw all this stuff happening and I thought like, okay, these guys are really serious. I'm going to make a mental note to sort of poke around and figure out what's going on. And I happened to know a friend of a friend who was heavily involved. And so I talked to my friend and I said, hey, can you put me in touch with fill in the blank? Because I really want to start asking a couple of questions. And he did. And that person was able to sort of help me get a foot in the door and start to figure out what was going on. Shortly after that, the members of the movement in October of 2019, they made sure to be in New York for New York Comic-Con at the exact same time. So from July to August, I was really sort of batting this around of like, who are these guys and what's going on? And in October of 2019, they rented the Times Square billboard. They rented a billboard in Times Square for Release the Snyder Cut. And it had a series of panels, and it was Jason Momoa and it was Kieran Hines. And then it ended with Zack Snyder saying, like, I have a cut, it's done. And I thought, if these guys are so motivated to get a Times Square billboard launched during New York Comic-Con, like, they're for real. And I got to start figuring out what their story is. It's just the journalism in the journalist in you that just wants to, like, every time something new happens, you just want to ask more questions and you just want to find out, like, what is really going on here? This is a great story.
I felt the spirit. I felt like a Lois Lane energy from when you were talking about, like, I want the answer. I want to seek the truth.
Yeah.
No, but like I gotta, because before, and this is not to blow smoke up your ass. Like, I really mean this, because I've seen other journalists who have been kind of dismissive of the Snyder Cut movement, kind of, they haven't really, given a chance to kind of see like what is it actually about. But so what I love what you're talking about here is the fact that you didn't know, you weren't completely, fully into it, but you gave time to like explore it, like kind of see like what are they about, like what are they fighting for. So and I think that's something we as journalists, I think that's what we owe, when we're covering these kind of IPs and these kind of characters and franchises to, and all because what drives these things are fans and consumers. So I think what you said a perfect example of how we should treat, even if we're a little, hesitant towards that, or maybe like, we don't know what it is, at least like give it a chance to see what it is. So I commend you for doing that.
Well, and I've said a couple of different times that if I got into the movement, if I started to investigate the movement, and I learned that they were all, self-centered, angry people who were doing this selfishly, for all the wrong reasons, then that would be the story that I wrote, essentially. But quite the opposite happened. Instead, the more I spoke to people who were in the movement, the more I realized why they were fighting. There's a charity component to the movement that by now I think more people are familiar with, but if you're not, because Zack and Debbie's daughter Autumn, who died by suicide back in 2017, that was the reason that Zack gave for stepping away from Justice League in the first place. The Release the Snyder Cut movement made it, part of their mission statement that they were going to raise money for the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. So everything that they do from a marketing standpoint also has a fundraising arm for AFSP. And that alone, to me, separates them from the majority of these other fan movements that feel like they want something. So, they get a lot of heat, or they get dismissed as entitled fans who are demanding something that they think that they should get. And I think it's quite the opposite. I think that they're doing incredibly good work for a really great charity, and they're using the power of their fandom to make a difference in the world. And so I celebrate them for that reason as well.
Yeah, I'm trying not to get too emotional about this, but yeah, I think that that I can't even imagine what that family had to go through, but because she was also so freaking young that it kills me from the inside. So yeah, there's definitely a bittersweet component to this. His movie is coming out, but this all happened, in maybe one of his worst moments of his entire life, having to step away from a film that he was passionate about because he lost a dear family member. So and that's what I love so much about this movement, that it's not just about celebrating artistic integrity, but also trying to raise awareness of teenagers, and young adults who struggle with mental health that need someone to talk to, that need to get help, so that we don't have to see these kind of news stories. It is absolutely heartbreaking. Absolutely. I want to try and go back to. I don't want to be a downer. So, but I want to talk to you a little bit now about what inspired you to write this book about the Snyder Cut movement, and because I've never talked to someone who has written a book. I read books, but I never actually talked to someone what the process is like and so on. So if you want to share your experience with us, that would be great.
Oh, it's incredibly daunting, and if you're thinking about doing it, turn around and go back, because it really consumes everything about you. And what people don't understand is it's not even just the writing of it, because I'd been told multiple times by people in my inner circle, oh, one day you're going to write a book, because I've been writing for 20 something years, and I was always like, no way am I going to do that, because I never found a story. I hadn't found a story that I thought was compelling enough to dedicate that much time to it, and that I thought had enough meat on the bone in order to tell the story. But once this came around, and the more that I learned about it, the more that I realized this is a book that I definitely do want to document. I want to document the progress of this movement. I want to document the hard work that's going into it by these people. I want to get their successes down on paper, because I thought that the fandom was doing things that were so different than any other movement, and managing to stay together, managing to stay unified for the most part. There's definitely some fractures in the movement, but managing to stay together long enough to keep their eye on the prize, to keep fighting for what they believed in. And for some people, it was artistic integrity. For some people, it was the charity component and mental health and suicide prevention. No matter what your reason, there was a good reason to be in the fight together. And so I wanted to tell that story. And for a long time writing the book, it felt like I was writing a breaking news story that just took 9 months to develop, because every time I'd get through another chapter or assemble a section of the book that I knew was important, something else major would happen. The movement would do another event that would raise awareness, whether it was a plane that flew over the Burbank studio for Warner Brothers, or this November 17th trending event that they did to truly raise the most awareness, which I think to me was the groundbreaking aspect of it. To then you would hear sort of behind the scenes reporting from sources that I have close to the situation that would say that, hey, Zack has actually screened a cut, of the Snyder cut to HBO Max, AT&T, to Warner Brothers. And you'd almost start to believe like, oh, wait a second, are we getting close to this happening? Because in the back of my mind, I thought it was going to be a Richard Donner type situation where it would take, years upon years to get the true restored version of what Zack thought. And truthfully, speaking with Zack after the fact, like, he thought that too. He did not believe that this was going to happen as quickly as it did. So I was racing the clock to almost make sure that like I documented this story and got all of it filed away so that people knew what had happened during this really pivotal time. And I still can't believe, I'll never come to terms with the fact that I finished the book right as Zack announced that the cut was coming, and that literally the book is going to drop like a couple of weeks before the cut comes to HBO Max. Like, that's ridiculous. It's just ridiculous. And so I honestly I'm chalking it up to some weirdo, bizarre turn of fate that's out of my hands.
So are you telling us that there is an alternate cut of the O'Connell Snyder cut book? Are we gonna start trending release the O'Connell cut?
There's a far worse version where at the end the cut doesn't get released. And at the end of the book it sort of just said, hey, if this ever happens one day, these are the people who made it happen. But instead, so Zack released the cut on May 20th. I literally was due to turn the book in June of 2020. When he announced on May 20th that it was happening, I turned around to my publishers and they were like, we can give you another month, go finish it, kind of thing. So I had to rework the ending, but I reworked it for the best reason possible. I reworked it to say these guys succeeded. And I was able to speak to some key members of the movement and take a victory lap with them and get that documented. And then of course, once it was confirmed that it was coming, Zack was able to come on and speak on the record. And so I was finally able to get him for the book. And that meant the world to me, to be able to finally get him, because he was radio silent up until that point. He knew that I was working on it. And I kept hearing from his reps and from him that like, he just couldn't talk. He couldn't talk. And then once it got released, that was it. We were able to get on the phone and I have his comments in the book. So that made the book for me.
They gave you a month only? I'm sorry. I'm still like a little. I was like shook. Like only a month? Like there's.
The good news is it didn't have to change. It didn't have to change drastically, because the steps that got us there were still the steps, right? I had to change a lot of tenses, like if this happens, and then it was like it happened, or who knows where it's going to go, and now it was like, oh, it's going to HBO Max. Like those are the types of little facts that had to be adjusted. And another major thing that changed was the opening chapter of the book, which at the time was going to be focusing on an event that took place in Pasadena that fans call SnyderCon, which was a screening of the theatrical cuts of Zack's films. And one of them was Batman vs. Superman Ultimate Edition. And after that, there was a Q&A and then an autograph line. And that was one of the evenings that Zack, for one of the first times, really spoke openly to his fans of, here's what was going to happen in my 5-story arc. There was going to be a boom tube, and Lois was going to die, and all this crazy stuff. And it also that was the moment when Zack confirmed on camera for the first time to a fan who was getting something signed that he has a cut and it's done, and it's up to the studio whether they're ever going to release it. So that to me was my entrance point into, here's the evidence that the fan base needed to be told this fight is worth fighting, right? Like, here's Zack saying to them, yes, it exists, and it's up to Warner Brothers to release it. So here's whose mind you have to change. But then when the cut got announced, like that beginning didn't make sense anymore, because why do you have a whole chapter of this is when they found out it's real if now we know that it's real? So I had to kind of rework that and find a new way in. But again, for the best possible reasons. All these changes had to happen because we were getting the cut. And I was thrilled to be able to make those changes, because that's what everybody was fighting for.
I'm sitting here and I'm just becoming so full of joy. I'm like, I'm so happy that this is happening for this dude, that not only is Zack getting his movie, but someone that is, and like, again, I'm not blowing smoke over your ass. Like, I really genuinely mean it, but as someone as passionate and someone who as caring as you have been for this movement, like, I'm just so happy that you got this. So like that's why, like, because here's the thing. Let me be perfectly clear. I don't read a lot of books. Like, the last time I read a book was maybe the Harry Potter books, and that was many, many moons ago, when I was a lot younger, when I felt good about myself.
You read comic books.
I read comic books, but I don't read books with no pictures. I have my smaller books, my small companion books and so on. But like, I haven't read a book that is just text. Then I see Sean's book happening. I'm just like, I'm getting this. I'm so excited to read books again. So I'm genuinely so happy that you got to talk to Zack, and because my only close encounter to him was just when I was at the BBS panel when they announced the movie, and at the Man of Steel panel, the first time I ever camped out. So I'm. Well, sorry,
Andy, honestly, no. I thank you so much for that. That means a lot for me to hear, because inevitably on social media, it's everybody's turn in the barrel at some point. The fan base is going to turn on you, and the current narrative being directed at me by a small group of people, or maybe a large group of people, who knows, is that I'm in this project for the money, which is really funny to me if they understood the amount of time that it takes to write a book. I couldn't imagine dedicating this amount of time to anything because of the amount of money their first-time author is going to earn. So, so I'm glad to hear that I sound like a passionate fan. I'm trying to just make sure that people understand. I chose to write this book because I believe in the story, and I believe in the people in the movement who I got a chance to speak to and got close to and learn their side of it. And I just hope that the book accurately reflects what they accomplished, because it's truly unlike anything that I've ever seen in my entire time covering this industry. There are so many different ways along the lines that this movement should have fallen apart. There's a ton of different times where Zack easily could have turned around and said to them, guys, I love everything that you're doing, but there's no cut. It doesn't exist. I appreciate your support, but let's move on. I got Army of the Dead coming to Netflix. The DC universe is going in one direction, but that never happened. All these, aspects come together in a truly, truly revolutionary and unique way. And all I tried to do was tell that story. So I hope I succeeded.
I'm pretty sure you did. And so, okay. I don't know how much you can reveal this, but but so it's up to you. But who did you interview for the release of Snyder Cut book, and why? Because you talked about people in the movement and so on. So can you elaborate a little more who you've talked to?
Sure. What I spent the most amount of time early on was two different forms of research. One was putting together all the steps that took place officially in the press and things that we've covered ourselves in terms of Zack's involvement in the DCU, his build up through Man of Steel and Batman versus Superman, everything that happened to him on Justice League. I have an entire chapter in the book about my trip to the Justice League set and all the stuff that we learned from Zack and Debbie and Charles Roven and the cast, all what their intention was for Justice League. And then on the other side, all the research that I was doing was who should I be speaking to in the movement? And I used initially my friend of a friend who was he was the first person who said to me, like, here's a list of people that you probably should talk to. They'll point you in the right direction. But he warned me up front that the Snyder Cut movement is very leery about talking to the press, because at the time there was a Wall Street Journal interview or article that had spoken to key members of the movement and then twisted their words and came out with a less than flattering portrayal of the movement, and really did more of the look at these crazy kooks, who think that they're going to get something released that doesn't exist. So the movement was super burned on that, and rightfully so. I understand where they were coming from. And so it took a really long time to just earn the trust of people in the movement and talk to them to get their story and to let them know that, like, this is literally all I'm trying to do is to figure out what you guys are trying to accomplish and how you're trying to accomplish it. But then another thing that I would run into with specific people in the movement is that they felt uncomfortable even making the story about them at all, because they wanted to keep the focus solely on Zack. And I had to kind of honor that too, because that's a legitimate complaint. That's a legitimate fear, is that, and especially now, since the movie has been released, the movement, not the movement per se, but the vocal minority that is severely negative in here will scream at anybody because they think that they're trying to get some type of clout, which I don't know what the clout is. I don't know what they think people are getting from being in the Snyder Cut movement. But there were people who had done a lot of really hard behind the scenes work to organize such things as, Project Comic-Con and the Times Square billboards and all of the other fundraising events that they did on social media to raise money for AFSP and these t-shirt campaigns and merchandise campaigns through a website called Ink to the People. There's a lot of people who did a lot of hard work who didn't necessarily want their names in the book, but they would give me great information behind the scenes and they would point me in different directions to go to. So they're all in there. And if I didn't get a chance to talk to certain people, or if certain people really wanted to stay off the record, I instead used podcasts that they had published, to get a couple of insights. And for the most part, once people started to figure out that I was legit trying to tell this story, more and more people opened up. But the biggest one that I got, the one that without getting her, I don't think the book would have worked, is Fiona. Fiona Zhang, who's in China and was, according to everyone, she was the one who was there from day one. She was the one who was the most active on social media and in chat rooms, starting literally on or even before November 17th, 2017, to remind people and to point out to people that the version of the movie that they saw in theaters was not the version that Zack wanted. And Zack, relied on her pretty early to push that message. He shared certain things with her that she was able to share with the fan base, and she became a real vocal cheerleader, and she became somebody who really kept everybody organized and on point. And so when I finally got to speak with her and when I finally got her answers, that was a significant turning point for me.
Yeah, Fiona, just from speaking personal experience, from what I've gone through with the release of Snyder Cut movement, I believe she was, if I know correctly, she was the one who created the forsnydercut.com. And so that's a really, if you go, it's a beautiful website. It's very well organized. It has a timeline of events. It has articles written by fans about why it matters to them that the Snyder Cut would be released. So yeah, Fiona was a critical person in the movement.
And if I never convinced her to speak, it would have felt like the book didn't hit its mark to me. So I was thrilled to be able to get her, and that took a lot of time. It took a lot of time and a lot of convincing.
Yeah, shout out to Fiona, and like, because as for out 2020, I started kind of looking into researching more people who are big voices in the movement or so, and I'm just like, Fiona is a freaking badass. So I shout out to her. If you're watching, Fiona, you're you know what, you're cooler than Superman. I'm just gonna say that. So I know that we still have a few more questions, but also we want to make sure that the listeners who are watching right now live and wired get a chance to tune in too. So Rebecca, do you want to pull up some questions for Sean from our audience?
Yeah, we have a question from Daniel who says, do you, Sean, know if there's something behind the Mark Hughes article hinting at animated stuff related with Zack Snyder's Justice League?
So I didn't read Mark's article, but what I'm gonna guess that he's talking about is how do you continue Zack's story? And Daniel, if I'm wrong about this, let me know. But the question becomes like, if the Snyder Cut airs on HBO Max and it ends on a cliffhanger, which it would have back in 2017, and I believe that that's how it's going to happen when it comes to HBO in March too. Also, Kevin Smith recently said on a podcast that when the word was going around that this is a storytelling cul-de-sac and that there's no way to go from it, and Kevin Smith said, no, from what I understand, like there's absolutely places you can go with it if you want to continue to keep telling the story. Maybe what Mark is talking about is that an easy way to continue the Snyderverse is through animation, because obviously DC does a really great job with DC animated features. And I personally think that it's easier to get the cast members to be able to do vocal performances for an animated feature that tells the next chapters of Zack's story versus trying to mount a full-on live action version, which is just very expensive. And, timing wise, getting everybody's schedules to line up the way that they would need to in order to continue the story. Now, I don't think it's impossible. And if the streaming service of HBO Max backs up a truckload to Zack Snyder and says, make it happen, then he'll probably try to make it happen. But maybe what Mark is trying to say is that animated at least gives him an option. And Zack said on one of the streams that he joined over the holiday season that he and Jim Lee have been having conversations about continuing the story in a graphic novel format, which I think is another way to go. Zack knows where he wants his story to go. It's a matter of how will he be able to tell it. Graphic novel is one way. I think animated feature is one way. And of course, live action is one way. But live action just to me seems like the most complicated one to pull off.
Yeah, if we can't get a live action, I will settle for animation. That would be totally
during this, the pandemic. Like, I mean, that would be suitable, for sure. And
think if he's able to handpick an animator that he truly, adores.
Right?
Yes.
So while I understand that the Snyder Cut movement clearly wants live action, I have been saying this recently too. I want everybody to kind of temper their expectation of what's next, and don't overlook the fact that the win still is that you got the Snyder Cut released. Like if nothing else happens from here on out for whatever reason, don't let that steal away from the victory of you got the Snyder Cut released. You're getting a 4-hour cut of Justice League, and somehow, some way, I think we're going to find out where Zack would have gone with it in full. He'll share it in some way, shape, or form. But if they say we can't do anything moving forward, don't let that steal away from the win that you got, because you got a huge win.
For sure. That this rarely happens, and if it does, it normally takes a long time.
Not to quote a certain singer, but never say never.
I think that's a good policy.
Look where we are right now. Like, look what was on my shirt.
Look what you were wearing. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. So,
well, to that note, we also have a question from Everyday Geeks who asks, "Do you think that the Snyder Cut will have Avengers level hype in the weeks leading up to it?" So, what are your thoughts on that, Sean?
Oh, I think so. I mean, if HBO knows what they're doing, they will be trumpeting, the arrival of the Snyder Cut as loudly as they can, because from a business perspective, they need this to drive up subscribers. They want people to come to HBO Max because this is the only place you can get it. But honestly, and I'm surprised it hasn't started now, like the marketing really needs to be like, this is the lost Justice League movie, the forbidden Justice League movie, that fans never thought they were going to get to see. And now you're getting a 4-hour cut of it. And one of the things that I think is slowing it down slightly is that we're still in COVID protocols. And I know that Zack would want to have a theatrical element to it. he's got this tailored for HBO for IMAX, but he also has to say that it's going to HBO Max, and they're trying to figure out the distribution of it. We're in the middle of January, close to the middle of January. We don't even know the March date yet. So there's things that they really need to button down to start drumming up awareness for it, because these marketing campaigns, you talk about the Avengers, an Avengers movie would have a marketing campaign that started a year ago. And I think that HBO needs to kind of step it up a little bit to let people know. And I know we've seen some of the activations happening, but I think they should be really blasting the news out there that this is happening. And I'm a little bit surprised that they haven't gotten it to that level just yet.
Yeah, I think at some point they'll start to ramp it up. I think I saw. I want to say that Zack in one of those live streams over the holidays maybe mentioned February would be when they would start promoting it. So that'll definitely be when we start looking out for some things. And we do have a question from Emily Grace, who asks, am I the only one hoping for an epic dance battle like we saw in the movie Sucker Punch? So Sean, I guess that leads into sort of like what would you be excited about for the Snyder Cut? Are you hoping for some, epic battle scenes that maybe we didn't get in the Justice League version?
Oh yeah. Well, there's two characters in particular that I want to see get their due, and that's the Flash and Superman. Flash, to me, who I love, and so I guess it's great that I'm on your podcast. He is one of the most exciting and has the most potential as a character. And I thought that he was completely gutted in the theatrical cut and watered down to just be the comic relief. And I think that Zack understands him far more than what we saw in theatrical cut. And I think Zack is going to lean into the power and the ability that Barry has with the Speed Force. So I can't wait to see him restored to justice, and not somebody who says, I've never done battle. I've just pushed people and run away. Like, that is such a demeaning statement to give to Barry Allen, and I'm horrified, and I can't wait to see him restored. The other one being Superman, because clearly through still the design of the story of Justice League, Superman will be dead for the majority of the film, and the league will debate about whether or not they should bring him back, and the ethical debate about that. But once he has returned, you're going to get the Superman who is in Man of Steel and BVS, and that's what I want to see. I want to see him fighting the League in Monument Park. I want to see him part of the battle against Steppenwolf at the end, which I imagine is going to be far more epic than what we got in theatrical cut. I want to see him go back to Kansas and have a reunion with Lois. I want another scene with Kevin Costner, with Pa Kent. Like, these are all the things that I can't wait to see in this full 4-hour version. And also, I think Zack was going to whittle down his version to about 2.5 hours, you assume, in 2017. He's now giving you the full-blown 4-hour cut. So you're going to get far more with all these characters that you love, filtered through Zack Snyder's unique perspective. And I honestly can't believe that this is a reality.
Well, I think someone just earned himself another invite back to the Flash Target for saying that, he wants justice for Barry, because Barry is my boy. I've been, not taking care of it. Oh my God. But I've been loving this character for 7 years, whether it's on TV or the comic, but now also what Ezra is doing. So Sean, I'm gonna we need to have some Flash discussions in the foreseeable future, and that kind of goes into
Anytime.
one of my questions, because the DC TV universe for most of its time stayed separate from the DCU, but last year around this time on the CW, Ezra Miller and Grant Gustin had a Flash of Two Worlds and Cries of Infinite Earth's crossover event, and it changed everything for the DC movies and TV shows going forward in terms of like doing crossovers and so on. So I just wanted to get your thoughts on that cameo and how Crisis now also opened up the multiverse, because the Flash movie with Ezra is going to have 2 Batman. So what are your thoughts about how they're embracing the multiverse for television and film, especially Snyder's cut? Snyder's cut is also now thinking outside of the main DCU continuity.
It's extremely exciting, as long as they figure out a way to wrangle it in, because it could lead to getting out of control in terms of storytelling. But if they keep it under the same umbrella and make everything kind of make sense, then I'm really cool with the multiverse, because it would allow you to potentially have a Snyderverse that exists on HBO Max You could have the CW shows and the way that they occupy. You could have something going on in the DCEU if you want to. Matt Reeves can go on and do his Batman story, and it doesn't have to directly connect everything. I think it's more challenging when you're trying to build a cinematic universe, when you're like, everything has to connect and all the threads have to cross each other. That's really hard to do. So if you have a multiverse where everybody can exist on Earth 1, Earth 2, all these, other alternatives, then that's an easier way to sort of set that up. But Ezra got his name, the Flash, from that scene, didn't he? Because he was never called the Flash in anything prior to that, from what I understand.
Yeah, no, because he reacts to like the Flash.
Yeah,
the Flash. And they confirmed that Grant Gustin names Ezra Miller's character.
Yeah.
So it's not a passing of the torch moment, but like, what an epic way to kind of like, hey, you know what? I'm gonna give you a little bit of a helping hand here.
Well, one of the reasons why I love it too is because that Flash movie from Andy Muschietti is coming so soon. If that was something that had happened and there was no payoff or direct continuation for another 5 to 10 years, it would have less of an impact. Like, we'd be like, oh, that was cute, but is anything ever going to really come from it? But now we're getting a Flash movie that's theoretically going to hit theaters in 2022 if everything stays on schedule. And that's great. Then hopefully they can build off of it. And maybe Grant could even show up in that movie, because I think that would be a fair little back and forth give and take.
I will pee myself to death if those two boys are like, listen, I don't care if it's IMAX, 3D, 2D, 5D, I don't care. Yeah. If they're standing next to each other in a theater, on a theater screen, after everyone has been saying that it's never gonna happen.
Right.
I feel so confident as a Flash fan. I know that we're starting to run out of time. I still had a few other questions, but like the key thing I want to wrap this up with is, of course, where people can get this damn book, because I know, for example, that I try to get it on Amazon, but it is out of stock, and I'm heartbroken. I'm like, so what do we do? Like, how can people get your book? And also, of course, what is the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention connection to the book? And kind of just for people who may not know but who want to be sure that they can get it.
Sure. Thank you so much for asking. All of this is very new to me, so it's available anywhere you can order books, as far as I'm aware of. It's on Barnes and Noble. Thank you for that graphic. That looks fantastic. Books A Million. It is on Amazon, most places. If it's out of stock right now, it's only because it's in pre-sale right now. But pre-sale numbers are really important for new authors, because it's a vote of confidence to the publisher that people are interested in the book that's going around. It's going to drop on March 1st. There is an ebook version of it as well too, if you want to read it on Kindle or some other type of electronic version. I'm also currently working really hard on an audiobook version of it. We're about to sell the rights to that, and my hope is to get Ray Porter, who is going to voice Darkseid in Justice League, who also does a lot of audiobooks on the side as well too. It's my hope to get him to do it. We've still been in a lot of conversations. It's taking a long time. I'm used to web publishing. You write something, it gets released, you move on to the next thing. The book publishing world moves very, very slowly. And so it's my hope still to have that finished by the time that the book drops on March 1st. But it's coming March 1st. And if you don't want to use any of the big box chains, there are a couple of independent bookstores as well too that have online ways for you to order them. And a book depository is another one if you're watching from places around the country or around the world, I'm sorry, because Zack has such a global audience. Bookdepository.com ships it to a lot of other locations, plenty of other locations. And so just do a search on Release the Snyder Cut book, search on my name. And if you have any problems finding it some way, hit me up on social media, and I'll do everything in my power to make sure that you find a link that works for you.
I'm still on the part. I heard all that, but I'm still on the part where you said Ray Porter.
Yeah.
Your book.
Yeah.
Such a good idea.
Yeah. I pray that it happens. And the person who is the company that has made an offer on the audiobook, and that we're trying to just work out the contracts of it all, they work with Ray on a regular basis. And I've already talked to Ray about it, and Ray said he was willing to do it. It's just a matter of whether he has the time that it takes, between now and March 1st to do it, because you want it to sound as professional as possible. And he wants to do it, from what I've heard from him. But the company came back and they were like, yeah, but because of timing, what if we have to go with somebody else? We've got a whole stable of people who can do it. And I was like, we need Ray We need Ray Porter. Make it work. He wants to do it. So, I mean, just to be able to turn around and say the Dark Side read my book is, I wouldn't even know what to do with myself.
Yeah. So how are you gonna? Good Lord! If this movie does not answer how to pronounce his real name, I'm gonna beg Ray Porter on Twitter, like, please, just like give me a class how to say it. I gotta do this for Rebecca, because Rebecca, isn't there someone we talked about that was interested in this book that you wanted to ask him about?
Oh, yeah. I saw, Sean, I saw that interview you did with Amy Adams where you talked to her about the book and said that, you would send her a copy. So I was just curious, are you still going to send her a copy? And I guess if you can quickly, because I know we're out of time, but just any thoughts on Lois Lane that you have would be great.
I will absolutely be sending a copy to not just Amy Adams, but any key member of the Snyder Cut, of the Justice League production, as well as Zack himself. The bizarre bit is that it was supposed to be released on February 15th. Because of production delays caused by COVID and so many other problems that are going on in the world, it got moved back to March 1st. March 1st is Zack Snyder's birthday. So again, it's something else that I think has to be just sort of in line. When I told Amy about that, I kind of wrestled with, like, am I actually going to tell her? Should I actually tell her? Should I bring it up? Because this was for a junket opportunity for the movie Hillbilly Elegy that she was promoting. And I happened to have the manuscript on my desk because I was just going through the very final edits. And so I picked it up and showed it to her. She was extremely excited to see it. And it wasn't, actor speak of just like, oh, that sounds really interesting. And it reminds me that she's been there from day one. Like, she's been with Zack on this journey. And so she literally seemed thrilled that he's getting his chance to tell his version of the movie that they worked really, really hard on. And she hasn't said much about the theatrical cut. She hasn't weighed in about how her character was treated and the really uncomfortable scenes that she had to be part of with Diane Lane, and how it stripped away the importance of Lois in the journey of Clark, because this is really, when you look at it, it's a Superman trilogy, and Lois is a significant part of this. And Zack has always treated her that way, and she wasn't treated that way in theatrical at all. And even Lois was restored to a whole new level in the Ultimate Edition of BVS. I thought that the scenes that were added back in, emphasized the reporting power of Lois and the journalism power of Lois. And so she's an important cog to this story. She's an integral part of the wheel. And so, absolutely, I'm going to be doing everything in my power to go through the publicists and get copies in the hands of the actors in the movie. I did send a copy of it to Ray Fisher very early on. He was giving me some support through it and talking me through, what he thought of it. And so, and when I was trying to get a cast member to write an introduction to the book, but again, we were kind of up against the deadline. And I reached out to Jason Momoa's people and I reached out to Ben Affleck's people, and both of them got back to me and said, like, they were super excited by the project and they think it's a really great idea. They just didn't have the time in the moment to write it. And so everyone's aware. They're all aware that the book is coming. Zack is absolutely aware because he did the interview for it. So I'm on their radar. We shall see where it goes.
Lois is so important that some might say that she is the key.
Am I too soon?
Yeah, even the chat is going like, she's the key. She's the key.
That is still one of my favorite scenes from BVS. I'll go back and rewatch Barry time traveling to Bruce.
I gotta read this one comment though from Daniel. Release a Snyder Cut book is certainly not a cul-de-sac. Yeah, that word is gonna haunt me because I'm like, one, it's I don't know why this is the first time I've heard of the word in like decades, but yeah, like this is not how you do marketing for your movie.
No.
Warner Brothers, like, so.
No, but I want to point out, because everybody's really quick to jump on who that quote is attributed to. Read that New York Times article. That quote is attributed to an anonymous executive source. So no one knows who honestly said that. Like in an article that heavily quotes Walter Hamada on several other things, but doesn't quote him on calling it a cul-de-sac. So we don't really know who actually is calling it a cul-de-sac. And the internet did what the internet does, which is, light their torches and grab their pitchforks and go after everybody for saying that. But I think a lot of that falls back of the article or whoever their anonymous executive source is. And obviously they didn't feel confident in the analysis that it's a cul-de-sac to put their name on the quote. And I think that speaks volumes.
Well, Twitter. That's all I'm going to say. Twitter. It's just Twitter. No, but to kind of wrap this up, because this has been an amazing interview, and I'm so happy that we got to have you on. But to just kind of wrap this up with your conclusions on this, like with everything that's happened with the Snyder Cut, the history that it has, how do you think this movie will affect Hollywood going forward when it comes to how studios actually treat their filmmakers and how they actually look at their consumers, who show the support for films like franchises like this?
I want to believe it's going to make a difference, but in reality, it probably won't. I think that this is a really unique situation. The way that Zack's fans rallied behind him, the way that this movement came together. I think in the realm of storytellers and filmmakers who have total control over their visions, the Christopher Nolans of the world, the Martin Scorsese's, the Steven Spielberg's, it's getting harder and harder for them to get their vision put across wholly, and especially with the rise of streaming and how theatrical has been essentially shut down for the past 12 months, or less than 12 months, but coming up on it. When that model gets back in play, when theatrical gets back in play, it's going to be even harder for movies that aren't blockbusters with recognizable IP to get made. And you're going to see more people. Look, Scorsese had to do The Irishman on Netflix. He can't get the freedom to tell the stories that he wants to tell. And the studios have far more power than the filmmakers do. And so while I think it's optimistic to think that this is going to convince studios to put more faith in filmmakers, the numbers still work against filmmakers, and the numbers still work in the studio's favor. Wah wah! What a downer!
No, because I just was really curious about what your thoughts were on this, because, I mean, we may not see something like this ever again for either project or whatever. And so, but the fact that this happened, that we had a studio that, they heard eventually what everyone around the world was saying, what they were fighting for. So, whether or not this changed Hollywood or not, the fact that this happened, the prophecy was fulfilled, as I've been saying it on my social media and so on. That we knew that there was a cut, we knew it was going to get released, and it's being freaking released. Yep. So, and I think that's a good place to wrap this up. But Sean, this has been such a blast. So thank you so much for coming on. I know I will definitely have you on in the very near future for The Flash. I don't know how you feel about Supergirl, but maybe maybe that's the thing. Maybe release the whole mystery that Zack set up with Supergirl mystery is just your sequel book. Because
she the pod, the open pod.
Yeah,
I mean, there somewhere.
The prequel comic. I mean,
does seem to suggest it.
Really does. That's my belief, anyway.
Yeah, I mean, and she's like probably just running around somewhere. Like, I mean, if she's been alive for 20,000 years. First of all, a 20,000-year-old Kara Kent, that would be like, would she still look young? Like, does she not age? That's something we need to get into at some point. But Sean, tell everyone where they can find you on social media. Tell them about Cinnamon if they're not familiar with it. Plug anything you want for the book, for any other part that you have, and anything else you want to say to the listeners.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me on, guys. I really appreciate it. This was a great conversation. I'm on Cinema Blend Daily. You can read all my stuff there. I do stuff for their YouTube channel as well too. So go give Cinema Blend's YouTube page a subscription. Go subscribe to that page and give it a like. We have a really interesting, I think, Snyder Cut series, a weekly Snyder Cut series that we break down. Recently, we broke down the difference between all the characters, of how different they'd be from theatrical versus how we expect them to be in Snyder Cut too. But Hannah Solik and myself are heavy into analyzing everything Snyder Cut. I'm on social media, Sean_O'Connell. The book has its own Twitter handle as well too, @RTSC Book. if you want to give that a follow. And of course, if you can help with pre-orders, if you guys are interested in this story at all, pre-order the book. It sends a great message to my publisher. It'll help them determine how much marketing they're going to do for it, and hopefully we can raise some awareness for the book and the movement and everything that was accomplished by the Snyder Cut fans as we get ready to watch it together on HBO Max in March.
Yeah, and listeners, we're going to provide all of this information in the show notes when we release the episode on Wednesday. So yes, go pre-order, go follow, go subscribe, and just look, follow his journey. I follow on Twitter. I will say I did blush when I saw that the book's Twitter account followed me back. I'm like, I'm even more stoked now. So go follow it, go pre-order it, and get ready for the Snyder Cut in Mars. And because Rebecca and I, we have some things we want to definitely do before we get to the Snyder Cut. So yeah, I mean, it's Mars feels too far away.
No, it'll be here before you know it.
Yeah, it'll be here.
I hope so. Well, I guess that's going to be it for this week's episode of the Flash Podcast. An amazing way to kick off 2021. So Sean, thank you so much again for coming on. Rebecca, thank you so much for co-hosting with me. Sure. And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in and making 2021 come off on a good start for the podcast. Because soon, supposedly these shows are coming back. I don't know, CW. I don't know. I keep thinking that at some point they're gonna be like, you know what? Flash season 7, Supergirl season 6. Just gonna have to wait a little bit longer. So we will see. But yeah, we're for the sake of time. You know where to find a podcast in the show notes. But I want to make sure that Rebecca gets to plug Supergirl Radio. So Rebecca, tell them when they can find you on social media and where Supergirl Radio is at and what's coming up, because you guys are coming back very soon.
Sure. Yeah, you can find Supergirl Radio at supergirlradio.com. We are on Supergirl Radio on all social media accounts, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. We do a lot of things on Instagram that we don't do everywhere else. So make sure to follow us on Instagram. We have a couple of cool things coming up this month. First off, we have a Wonder Woman 1984 review that will be live. So come and wear your best 80s stonewashed jean jacket or, whatever you have. We might be in 80s garb, so you'll enjoy that. Maybe a side ponytail, who knows. And then after that, we're going to do a Supergirl Radio game night with some people associated with the Morgan Glennon podcast universe, is what I'm calling it. So we'll be playing a game live, so you can come and enjoy that. We'll also be learning about Supergirl Silver Age stories while we play the game. So if you're interested in that, definitely come hang out with us. And then we have our 300th episode coming up, so you'll get to hear the big montage that we usually do for these milestone events. So yeah, Supergirl Radio is going to have a lot of fun. Even though there's no Supergirl TV series, we're still talking about Supergirl.
Should I be jealous about the fact that my spin-off podcast is getting to 300 episodes before the Flash podcast has even gotten to 300 episodes? Should I feel jealous?
No, I don't think so. It just means that we're insane. We just do too much.
I mean, well, yeah, it's 300 episodes. Oh my god, I don't even know what I'm going to do for our 300 episodes. That's going to be I have a few ideas, but I haven't finalized them. So, but guys, you can follow me at Behbakht on all social media. Find me at Screen Rant, Times Podcast, all that good stuff. Find me on YouTube. I'm going to start doing more YouTube content this year. And also, speaking of YouTube, go subscribe to DC Podcast YouTube channel right now. Hit that notification bell so you know when we go live with a new, with a new stream and when we release a new video. And because Rebecca, Supergirl, they're always live and wired on Tuesdays. So tune in for that. And actually, the network is going to start doing more video content and live stuff throughout 2021, because the beauty of StreamYard, like it is so look at all this, Sean, I don't, I'm sure you maybe noticed, but Rebecca put together this amazing what is it, overlay? Is it called an overlay?
This is a background. The overlays are kind of what comes up on the screen. Okay. Yeah,
it looks fantastic.
Well, thank you.
So so there's streaming is so much fun, so we're gonna definitely be doing this. So yeah, hit that subscribe button if you like this video, hit the like button and hit the notification bell so you get notified when we go live and hit a brand new video. I'm going to become one of those people that is like and subscribe, and I'm going to hate myself for saying that, but it's important. So we're going to sign off. So guys, thank you so much. Thank you, Sean, once again for coming on, and Rebecca for co-hosting, and to our amazing listeners across the entire multiverse. Thank you for tuning in. And yeah, here's for 2021 to be a little bit less crazy. Because we don't need 2021 again. We don't need 2020 again. We need something more solid, something more stable, and that will include the Snyder cuts. So, yeah, we will see you on the next episode of Flash Podcast and Supergirl Radio and the rest of the DC Podcast Network.